You lost your peace again today, over something you will not remember tomorrow. Nothing catastrophic happened. No disaster. No tragedy. A car cut you off. A message in the family group chat that you reread 3 times before answering. Someone at the bank who took forever. Small things. Things that, laid out like this, sound almost embarrassing for having knocked your whole day off course. And the worst part was not that you got irritated. The worst part is that you never chose it. It happened before you noticed it was happening. You got home carrying a weight with no exact name. It was not the traffic itself. It was the sum of everything that pulled you out of center throughout the day. One small thing after another, until you realized you had spent more energy reacting than living. It repeats. Yesterday it was the driver. The day before. A comment in a meeting. Last week. A reply that took hours longer than you expected. The face changes. The scene changes. But the outcome stays the same. You end the day more tired on the inside than the outside. Unable to pinpoint what exactly happened. Just aware that something got spent that sleep will not refund. It does not stay confined to traffic or the checkout line. It shows up in the notification that lights up your phone while you are in the middle of something else. It shows up in the meeting where someone interrupts for the 3rd time. It shows up at Sunday dinner. In a family comment wrapped in the tone of a joke but landing with a weight no joke should carry. It shows up in the coworker who turns something in late and knocks your whole plan sideways. Different scenes, different people, different settings, but the mechanism underneath is always the same one, a broken expectation, followed by a reaction you never remember agreeing to. And there is a question almost nobody bothers to ask, because it sounds too obvious to matter. What exactly irritated you today? And was it actually in your hands? Most of the time, it was not. The traffic was not. The other person's comment was not. The time someone took to reply was not. You spent your entire energy trying to control, or reacting to the loss of control over, things that were never yours to decide in the first place. This is not about patience, or the lack of it. It is not about being emotionally stronger or weaker than the next person. It is about where you are putting your attention, and about the fact that nobody ever taught you to make that distinction before reacting. Nobody sat you down as a kid and explained that there is a line between what can be changed and what can only be walked through. Nobody said that reacting to everything with the same intensity was a habit, not an obligation. You picked up somewhere along the way without noticing you were picking it up. That caring meant reacting, and that not reacting meant not caring. That equation was never true. It just settled in early, and it still runs a good portion of your days without you ever questioning it. Epictetus, a philosopher born into slavery, who spent his life thinking about the one territory that actually belongs to a human being, wrote something that has traveled 2,000 years, like it was said yesterday. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions they hold about them. Notice what that line does not say. It does not say the traffic does not exist. It does not say the other person was not rude, or that the delay was not real. It says something else, something sharper and more uncomfortable. It says that between the fact and your suffering there is a step you skip without noticing, and that step belongs entirely to you. You do not suffer because of the car. You suffer because of the idea that traffic should flow the way you needed it to. You do not suffer because of the wait in line. You suffer because of the expectation that someone else's pace should bend to yours. The pain never comes from the world as it is. It comes from the distance between the world as it is and the world you were demanding, without realizing you were demanding it, that it be. And that is exactly where something still unsaid lives. There is a line separating what falls inside your control from what never did. And most of your daily irritation sits entirely on the wrong side of that line. Think about the last time someone actually got under your skin. Not the big argument, not the important falling out, the small thing. Someone's tone, a silence you read as dismissal, a plan that changed last minute without anyone bothering to give you real notice. In almost every one of these cases, what happened was not in your hands. What was in your hands was one thing only: how you were going to respond to it on the inside. And that distinction changes everything, because it hands you back the one territory that was always yours, the one you have been quietly giving away, argument after argument, line after line, without noticing. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire, and still wrote to himself every morning, had the habit of preparing before he even got out of bed. He wrote that on waking he should tell himself he would meet people who were meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, unsociable, and that all of them acted that way because they could not tell good from bad. He did not write that as bitter resignation. He wrote it as preparation, because someone who already knows they will run into the traffic, the comment, the delay, is not caught off guard by any of it, and someone who is not caught off guard spends far less energy defending against something they were already expecting. Take a second and think back to your own morning yesterday. The driver who cut you off was not thinking about you specifically. He was living his own day, with his own hurry, his own exhaustion, his own reasons. You will never know. The person in the family chat who wrote that comment was, in her own head, just commenting, not, in most cases, trying to hurt you, just being exactly who she has always been, without asking anyone's permission for it. And you still carried the whole weight alone, as though you had been personally selected to feel it. This does not mean accepting everything in silence, or pretending nothing bothers you. It means something else, something more precise. It means you stop spending your entire peace of mind on things that were never dependent on you to exist, and save that energy for what is actually in your hands. There is a simple test you can run in seconds. Anytime something starts pulling you off center, facing anything that irritates you, there is only one question that matters. Is this in my hands, or is it not? If it is, the move is action. Say what needs saying, fix what can be fixed, leave where you need to leave. But if it is not, and most of the time it is not, the only move available is internal. It is deciding what you are going to do with what you felt, since you cannot decide what happened. Most people never ask that question. They react first, and only afterward, if ever. Notice they burned an entire afternoon of energy on something that was never theirs to fight in the first place. Think about how many times that happened this week alone. How many times you lost your center over something that, looking back now, you barely even remember. Worth stopping to count, not to beat yourself up over it, but to start seeing a pattern that has been invisible until now. Because once a pattern is seen, it does not disappear on its own. It only loses its grip when you start testing it, one situation at a time. Pick something that irritated you this week, anything, and run the test right now, with that specific example in mind, before reading on. Was that in your hands, or was it not? If you run that exercise, honestly, you will notice something uncomfortable. The vast majority of what steals your peace, day after day, was never under your control to begin with, and you still treated it as though it were, spending real energy trying to change, fix, or win something that was never a fight that belonged to you. That is not weakness. It is a habit nobody ever taught you to interrupt, and there is a cost to this that reaches well beyond the moment of irritation itself. Every time you react to something that was not in your hands, you do not just lose that 1 minute. You lose the availability you would have had for the rest of the day. You get home with less patience for the people who actually matter. You go short with people who least deserved it. And the next day, the cycle starts over with a new excuse and the exact same reaction. Seneca wrote, in a tone that reads almost like a personal warning, that no other human vice costs as much as anger. He said it does more damage to the person who feels it than to the one who caused it. Sit with that for a second. The person who cut you off in traffic went on with his day without a single thought of you. The comment in the family chat was already forgotten by the person who wrote it. But you, if you let the episode settle in, carry the weight of it for hours, sometimes for the whole day. The bill did not split evenly. You paid the higher price for an event that was never yours to begin with. That changes the question worth asking the next time something irritates you. It is no longer who is right. It is who is paying the higher price for this irritation to keep going. And if you already watched the video on people who drain your energy. You will recognize this mechanism from a different angle, because what drains you is not always one specific person you have an ongoing relationship with. Sometimes it is a pattern, repeated in different scenes, with different people, all connected by the same root. The refusal to accept that some things sit outside your control, paired with the automatic habit of reacting as though they all belonged inside it. It is not about winning against traffic. It is not about winning the argument in the comments section. It is about no longer fighting battles that were never yours. And here is the part that changes everything. Even though it sounds almost too small to carry that much weight, you do not need the world to behave differently to have peace. You just need to stop spending your energy trying to make that happen. This is not indifference. It is not ceasing to care about what happens around you. It is the difference between caring and drowning. You can notice that traffic is bad without letting it decide your mood for the rest of the day. You can register that someone was rude without carrying that rudeness home as though it belonged to you. You can wish things were different without demanding that they be, as a condition for being okay. And there is a real difference between accepting and giving up. Accepting that traffic is at a standstill does not mean giving up on getting where you are going. It just means you stop spending energy fighting a fact that has already happened, one that no amount of irritation on your part is going to undo. The energy left over from that acceptance is the same energy you get to spend on what is actually in your hands, which is how you arrive wherever you are going and in what internal state you get there. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not over outside events. Realize that, and you will find strength. It is not the kind of strength that shows up in big moments. It is a small strength, exercised many times a day, nearly invisible to anyone watching from the outside. Nobody sees you decide not to react to the comment. Nobody sees you let the traffic pass without carrying it into your own front door. But you feel the difference. And after a few weeks of practicing this, your entire day weighs less. Not because the world changed, but because you stopped adding up battles that were never yours to fight. There is a short line that can work as an anchor in this process. Something to remember the exact moment irritation starts to rise. This is not mine to carry. It is not mine to carry the traffic. It is not mine to carry the other person's comment. It is not mine to carry a delay that had nothing to do with me. It belongs to whoever caused it, or it simply belongs to the world, which runs on its own rules and never asked for your approval on any of them. This does not mean you will never get irritated again. You will. You are human, and the initial reaction fires off before any philosophy gets a say. But there is a real difference between the spark that lights itself and the fire you choose to feed afterward. The spark is not in your hands. Fires. And this is where the practice becomes real. Far from theory, right inside the next time someone cuts you off in traffic, or a message arrives, loaded in a way you recognize instantly. The moment you feel the irritation rising, before any word, before any reaction, ask the question, is this in my hands, or is it not? If it is not, let the spark rise and fall on its own, with no new fuel added. If it is, act, but act from choice, not reflex. Over time, that question stops needing to be spelled out in words. It turns into an automatic filter, almost silent, sorting what actually deserves your energy from what is only asking, with no real claim to it, to eat up your day. Picture your next work meeting, the one where someone cuts you off mid-sentence. The old reaction would raise your voice, prepare a comeback, file it away as an insult for the rest of the day. The trained reaction asks the question first. How that person interrupts is not in your hands. What you do with your own interrupted sentence is, you can pick back up calmly or let it go, and neither option requires you to carry that interruption around as a personal attack. Picture Sunday dinner, with the usual comment from the person who always makes that kind of comment. The old reaction fires back on the spot, or swallows it in silence while your face burns underneath. The trained reaction names what is happening first. That person has always been like this, and will probably keep being like this. That is not in your hands. What is in your hands is deciding whether that specific comment deserves a response. or whether it can pass through you without settling, like a sound that comes and goes. Picture the message that takes hours to get a reply, while you keep checking your phone every few minutes, building theories about the silence on the other end. The old reaction feeds the anxiety with every new check. The trained reaction remembers that someone else's response time was never yours to control, and that the only thing actually yours in that wait is deciding whether to spend the afternoon held hostage by a screen or keep living while the reply is not there yet. None of these scenes requires a new version of you. It just requires the same question, asked early enough to change the outcome. Is this in my hands, or is it not? And what is left at the end is not the feeling of having won something. It is a different feeling, quieter and more lasting. It is the sense of having energy left over for what actually matters. Because you stopped spending it in places that never deserved that much of you. You will still run into traffic tomorrow. You will still run into the tone-deaf comment, the inconvenient delay, the person who cuts through your day with zero intention of doing so. None of that is going to stop happening, because none of it was ever in your hands to begin with. What changes is you. It is how fast you recognize where what is yours ends and where what never was begins. It is the lightness of getting home carrying less than you used to. Not because the world got kinder, but because you stopped picking up every rock it drops in your path. This is not a transformation that arrives all at once, like a decision made one morning and finished by night. It works more like a muscle. The first few times you ask the question before reacting, it still feels forced, almost artificial, like you are interrupting something that should have just flowed on its own. But with every repetition, the gap between stimulus and response gets a little wider, a little more natural, until one day you notice you made it through an entire commute without carrying any of it into your own house, and you cannot even pinpoint when it started happening without effort. That is the difference between someone who gets pushed through the day by everything that crosses their path and someone who moves through that same day with their center intact, not because the day was easier, but because they learned, practice after practice, to tell apart what was theirs to carry from what never was. If this distinction has already made sense to you, at some point this week, write it below in the comments. It was not in my hands. Sometimes, just naming it is enough to loosen the weight you have been carrying without realizing you were free to set it down. Seneca wrote that no one is free who is not master of himself.